I'm Jaden, and I'm going to tell you about my January and February reads of 2024. So from January to February, I read about 19 books. So I'm going to tell you about all the books I read, maybe a little synopsis, and what I would rate each book that I read. Starting in January, the first book I read was Death is My BFF, and it's a Wattpad story that got turned into a book. I rated this 3 stars. The writing was not the best. There were lines in the book that were like, he came up to me like a jump cut, and like, so I would read some of these lines and they would just take me out of the writing. And so, yeah, I rated this book 3 stars. It's funny because after I read this book, I looked at reviews and everybody was like, I read this originally on Wattpad. This story is so good. I can't wait for the sequel. Like, oh my gosh, this book is so good. And like, none of the reviews I read were like from people who didn't read it on Wattpad. And I just seemed like the only one who hadn't read it on Wattpad before. And so I rated it 3 stars. It ends on a cliffhanger, but I don't care, and I'm not going to read the sequel. The second book I read was called Lilith. So I rated Lilith 3.5 stars. And so this one is about Lilith from the Garden of Eden. And she gets cast out. And so it gives us a different interpretation of Christianity events. So like about the ark with Noah, Jezebel, Adam in general. So it gives us different variations of those stories, which I sort of liked. But I did rate it 3.5, and I did write a review on it on Goodreads, and I said there were some good ideas presented in the story, but they weren't done very well. The phrasing of sentences is hard to understand at times, and there are so many names mentioned at a time that it's hard to keep track of, which I do agree with. They would also use the old names of, they also did Jesus this time too, of disciples, and it was very hard to figure out which disciple they were talking about because they used old names and not like the modern names, which made sense because those are the only names that she would have known at the time, but not, modernized names. Also, the ending of the book wraps up in modern times in the last 10 pages of the book, and it feels very rushed. I still agree with that. So Lilith has got 3.5 stars. The next book I read after that was Unpuzzling Afternoon. I rated this 4 stars. I don't remember much about the story, but I think I would almost read this book again. It just left me, ending was really good. I think I was just mad at the ending. After that, There's No Way I Die First. So I didn't like this book. I rated it a 2.5. Which is interesting because I thought, oh, it's like a horror movie kind of esque, and I really like horror movies. Well, depending on the horror movie, I like horror movies. So I'm just gonna go on my rant on Goodreads because it's accurate with what I still think about it. So I said there were some interesting aspects of the book, and I liked the inclusion of the movie horror quotes at the beginning of each chapter. But that's all I like about this movie. So this might go into spoiler territory of this book. So if you don't care about spoilers, go ahead. But if you do, just skip ahead to the next one. So here's what I didn't like about There's No Way I Die First. Again, this is a 2.5 book. There were too many characters in the book that when people died, I didn't care because they were cannon fodder. That's one of my icks I don't like, if they introduce a bunch of characters and then most of them are cannon fodder. I don't care. So I'm like, I don't care about these people when they die because there's too many of them. The setup of the house was where the party happens. It's very confusing. The killer is part of a super far left group, and that's his reason for killing. But then he uses super right terminology, which felt really weird. The main character needs her white love interest to be her during her entire time, because he's her alibi, but he can confirm what happened during the murder party, so she doesn't get blamed for it because she's a African-American teenage girl. And then the book abruptly ends after the murders and it's just done. So yeah, I didn't like this book. Again, 2.5 0.5 only because of the movie quote. Better than that, it's a 2. I did not like this book. After that, we got How to Find a Missing Girl. Gave this one 3 stars. I don't know much about this book. I'm sorry. I gave this book 3.5 stars, and I did not tell myself why. But I'm saying 3.5 stars. There's probably a reason. I don't remember the reason. But 3.5. Next one is Black Sheep. I really like this one. This one is about this girl gets away from a cult, and then she has to get back into the cult. And it's a Lucifer related cult. So that was a big shock to me. And I really liked that because I'm like, oh, it's just going to be like an ordinary kind of, she escaped the cult, now she has to go back to, and then like who they worship. It's a big surprise to me. I liked it. I liked learning about all her religious trauma, and I just like how it was a new twist on, people who live cult. I thought it was going to be like a generic cult story about Christianity, and it wasn't, and it was really good. I really liked that book, so I would highly recommend that one. Next one I read is Rouge or Rogue. I don't know. I didn't like this book. It took me forever to get through this book. It just felt like it was dragging on. I gave this one 2 stars. I could not, at the end, I got through faster because I'm like, I have to get through this book. But at the beginning, it just felt like I was dragging on. I did not like it. I didn't like the writing style. It was boring, and it was a slog to get through. That is still true. I do not like that book. Alright, after that, we got You're Not Supposed to Die Tonight. I really liked this book. I gave it 4 stars. It's almost perfect. I finished this book in like less than a day because it was so short and it was so good. I wanted to continue to read it. But yeah, it was really good. I just didn't like, I think, the ending or the villains or something, so I only gave it 4 stars. Like, I would almost read this book again. But yeah, 4 stars, but it was really good. It was a really fast read, and I really liked it. Last one for January was There He Kept Her. I rated this 3 stars. 3 stars. I think some of the writing was weird. I don't remember why I gave it 3 stars. 3 stars is my kind of like okay book. But yeah, I thought it was an okay book. Alright, now we're getting into February. So the first book I read in February is The Oscar Wars, A History of Hollywood in Gold, Sweat, and Tears. I rated this one 4 stars. I really liked this book. It was more like a history, non-fiction-y book about how the Oscars came to be, which I really liked because, Oscar season's coming up. I only gave it 4 stars because sometimes in the beginning when they were talking about the history of the Oscars and stuff, it felt very dragged on and I didn't care. I'm like, just get me to the juicy, Oscars, controversies, the winners, all the drama behind. I didn't really care about, like, how it came to be. So that's why I only got 4 stars. But, like, yes, that part's important, but I didn't care for it. After that, we got MCU, The Reign of Marvel Studios. Again, I gave this one 4 stars. Some of it was because of the dragging of, like, how it was slowly getting to be, which I didn't really care about. So it's just how it came to be. So that, and then, like, a lot of times they would, like, mention things that would happen in other future Marvel movies. And they kept doing that. And they kept really, like, oh, this thing happened. And this has also happened in this movie. It was just really annoying after a while. I'm like, I don't care. I don't care. So yeah. After that, we have The Senator's Wife. I rated this one 2.75 stars. I wrote that it had too many characters that got introduced way too fast in the beginning, which is true. I hate that. Don't give me like 10,000 characters and then 90% of them are cannon fodder. Because then I don't care. I don't care. There were also multiple POVs for characters that I don't care about. They would only get like a couple of chapters and like it would lead to what would happen at the, like later down the line, but I didn't care. But like the plot just came out in the last like 20 pages of the book, and they're like, oh frick, I forgot to say who it is. We're gonna pick this person. Right, now that's who it is. And it's just really weird and comes out of left field, and I'm like, I do not like that. I didn't like the book, but it was a fast read, so I'll give it that. Alright, after that, we got Monica Rambeau Photon comic book. I gave this one, I gotta look, make sure I know how many stars I gave it. I did give it 4 stars. I think it was a fast read, and I like learning more about Monica, especially as the Marvels movie came out a few months ago, and I really like that book, so 4 stars. After that, I read Secret Invasion Meet the Skrulls. I also rated it 4 stars. Again, I like this book. It was a fast read, and it had me learn more about the Skrulls, which I really liked. Yeah. Alright. Next, I read That's Not My Name. I rated this 4 stars. I thought it was a really good book. I think maybe the plot twist at the end made me upset. I remember reading it and being like, no. I was so sad at the end. At the ending, that's probably why I gave it 4 stars. But yeah, other than that, it was a really good book, 4 stars. After that, I read The Lost Ones, which is part of the Dark Ascension series. I really like this book, 5 stars. It's basically a book about how Captain Hook became Captain Hook before he became Captain Hook, and I really liked that. I'm pretty sure it was a really fast read. And I love different iterations of Disney classics, so this was really good. Short chapters, and if like you read the synopsis, you know one of them's not you. If you know the story of Peter Pan, you know what's gonna happen, and when it happens, you're still like, my heart, because you really care for these characters, and then you're like, nah. Alright, after that, I read The Only Survivors. I rated this one 3 stars. I don't remember much about this book. I think I was really looking forward to this book, and then it was meh. It was okay. Yeah, there was like a twist at the end, and I didn't like that. And the writing was weird, if I remember correctly. But yeah, it was okay book. I didn't really care. After that, we have The Girl Who Was Taken. 4 stars. I really like this book. Again, the twist endings, I'm not liking. Like, this book was almost perfect, and then the twist came at the end, and I'm like, no, I don't like this. So, 4 stars to you. And then lastly, we have The Fortune Teller. It's funny, because when I read this book, I thought it was gonna, like, I read the synopsis of this book, I thought it was gonna be similar to, like, Saltburn. Because, like, it made, like, the synopsis kind of made me feel like, oh, it's gonna be like Saltburn, how, you know, oh, somebody sneaks into the rich and famous, just like Oliver does to Felix, and something like that. It's not like Saltburn. It's not like Saltburn. But I rated this book 3.5 stars, so Fortune Teller has a 3.5. I gave it a 3.5. And I said that the writing sometimes confused me and made me need to reread passages because it still confused me. Because there were certain parts when they're like, this happened, and I would reread it, and I'm like, that didn't happen. Like, there's no way mentioned on these few pages that happened. Like, this is confusing. The epilogue of the book wasn't necessary. And this will get into spoiler territory for the rest of my review. So, the main character, after, like, you know, like, I'm gonna do this entire story, this is who I'm supposed to be, because, like, somebody I idolize has this, so I'm gonna do this. And then, you know, her entire world comes down, and she's like, yeah, I don't want to do this anymore. And she goes back home, and it just feels weird and out of character. Like, it makes sense for the story wise, but it felt just really weird. Because like she was like, I'm not gonna do this, and then she ends up doing it, and it felt just really weird. Especially when the entire story, she's like, I'm not gonna do that, and then she does, all because of what happens around her. Again, it just felt really weird and out of place, and I didn't like that. Like, it felt relatable because people do that all the time. Like, I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna say, oh, this is not how life panned out, so I'm gonna do this instead. Which, like, is relatable to people. But I just thought it didn't make sense for the story-wise. So that's why I gave it a 3.5. So yeah. So those are the 19 books I read in combined from January to February. If you want a deep dive or you want me to go into March or April, let me know. But yeah, thanks for listening. And if you have any books I should read for future months, let me know down below.